Karoline Leavitt was not someone who dreamed of changing the world. She grew up in a quiet little town in New Hampshire, where life moved slowly and everyone knew each other's names. Her childhood was simple. She loved reading books, playing, outside with her siblings and dreaming about what the future might hold. But as she got older, those dreams started to feel blurry. After graduating from college with a degree in communications, Karoline found herself stuck. She had big ideas but no clear direction. The real world felt overwhelming, and she often wondered if she'd ever find something that truly made her heart race. Politics wasn't even on her radar back then. To Karoline, it seemed like a messy, complicated game that only caused arguments at family dinners or heated debates online. It didn't seem like something she could ever be passionate about. Instead, she spent her days working part-time jobs, applying for positions that never panned out, and trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. Friends would sometimes ask her opinion on current events, but she usually shrugged them off, saying she didn't know enough to have an opinion worth sharing. One day, while scrolling through social media during a lazy afternoon, Karoline stumbled upon an announcement. Donald Trump, the former president and one of the most talked-about figures in America, was holding a rally just a few towns over. At first, she dismissed it. Not my thing, she thought. But later that evening, while chatting with some friends, over coffee they brought up the rally again. They were excited, talking animatedly about how inspiring Trump's speeches could be. One friend joked, "You should come with us. Maybe you'll finally understand why we're so obsessed." At first, Karoline laughed it off, but the idea lingered in her mind. She'd always been curious about people who felt so strongly about their beliefs. What was it about Trump that drew such passionate crowds? Was there something she was missing? That night, after tossing and turning in bed, she decided to go. Not because she expected to change her mind about politics, but because she wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Deep down, she hoped the experience might give her some clarity, even if it was just a fun way to spend an evening. The day of the rally arrived, and Karoline joined her friends in the car, feeling both nervous and intrigued. As they drove closer to the venue, the excitement in the air became undeniable. Cars lined the streets, bumper stickers proudly displaying slogans, and people waved flags as they walked toward the arena. When they finally arrived, Karoline stepped out into a sea of red hats and cheering voices. The energy was contagious, and for the first time in a long while she felt a spark of curiosity ignite inside her. Inside the packed venue, the atmosphere was electric. People chanted slogans, clapped rhythmically, and held up signs with messages of hope and defiance. Karoline looked around, taking it all in. She noticed families standing together, young adults filming videos, and elderly couples holding hands. Everyone seemed united by something bigger than themselves. For someone who had spent years feeling lost and unsure, this sense of connection was powerful. It made her wonder, could politics really bring people together like this? When Donald Trump finally appeared on stage, the crowd erupted into deafening cheers. Karoline watched as he confidently strode to the podium, his presence commanding attention. He began speaking, his voice booming through the speakers. At first, she listened skeptically, waiting for the moment when she'd lose interest. But as he spoke, something shifted. His words weren't just about policies or elections. They were about resilience, determination, and standing up for what you believe in, no matter the odds. Trump shared personal stories about challenges he'd faced and how he'd overcome criticism and setbacks. He talked about the importance of staying true to your values, even when others tried to tear you down. These themes resonated deeply with Karoline. She thought about her own struggles, the uncertainty she'd felt after graduation, the fear of failure, and the constant search for purpose. Listening to him speak, she realized that maybe she wasn't alone in feeling lost. Maybe there was strength in pushing forward, even when the path ahead seemed unclear. As the speech went on, Karoline felt tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't explain why. It wasn't sadness or frustration. It was something else entirely. It was a mixture of inspiration, recognition, and a strange sense of belonging. For the first time in years, She felt like someone understood what she'd been going through. More importantly, she felt like she had permission to dream bigger and fight harder for the things she cared about. By the end of the rally, Karoline's perspective had changed completely. She left the venue with her head spinning, replaying moments from the speech over and over in her mind. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to take a turn. Little did she know, this single event would set her on a journey she could never have imagined, a journey that would lead her to discover her voice, her passion, and ultimately, her place in the world. The moment Donald Trump stepped onto the stage, the entire arena erupted into a roar so loud it felt like the ground beneath Karoline's feet was trembling. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering as if they were welcoming a hero, returning from battle. Karoline, who had come with no expectations, found herself caught up in the energy of the crowd. She stood shoulder to shoulder with strangers, yet somehow she didn't feel out of place. The excitement around her was infectious, and for the first time in a long while she felt alive, like she was part of something much bigger than herself. Trump began speaking, his voice booming through the speakers with a confidence that demanded attention. At first, Karoline listened cautiously, unsure of what to expect. She'd heard snippets of his speeches on TV before, but this was different. Being there in person made everything feel more real, more raw. He started by talking about America, the land of opportunity, the home of dreamers, the place where anyone could rise above their circumstances if they worked hard enough. These words weren't new to Karoline. She'd grown up hearing similar sentiments in school and from family members. But there was something about the way he said them that struck a chord deep inside her. As the speech went on, Trump shifted gears, diving into stories about his own life. He spoke candidly about the challenges he'd faced, how people doubted him, how critics tried to tear him down, and how he refused to let negativity stop him from pursuing his goals. Karoline listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. His words painted a vivid picture of resilience, determination, and unwavering self-belief. For someone who had spent years feeling stuck and uncertain about her future, these themes hit close to home. One particular story stood out to Karoline. Trump recounted a time when he faced immense pressure during one of his business ventures. Investors pulled out, partners walked away, and the media wrote him off as a failure. Instead of giving up, he doubled down on his vision, working tirelessly to turn things around. "They told me I couldn't do it," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "But I didn't listen. You can't let other people define your limits. Only you know what you're capable of." Karoline felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Those words echoed in her mind, resonating with her own struggles. After graduating college, she'd faced rejection after rejection, job applications ignored, interviews that led nowhere, and constant reminders that the world wasn't ready to hand her a clear path. There were days when she questioned whether she was good enough, smart enough, or talented enough to succeed. Listening to Trump speak, she realized that maybe the problem wasn't her lack of ability. It was her fear of failure holding her back. What truly moved Karoline, though, was the emotion behind his words. It wasn't just about policies or politics. It was about standing up for yourself, staying true to your values, and refusing to give up, no matter how tough things got. As he spoke, she noticed tears forming in the corners of her eyes. At first, she tried to blink them away, embarrassed to cry in such a crowded place. But the more he talked, the harder it became to hold back. By the time he reached the climax of his speech, a passionate call to action urging everyone to fight for their dreams, Karoline's cheeks were wet with tears. Her friends glanced at her, surprised to see her so emotional. "Are you okay?" one of them whispered, leaning closer. Karoline nodded, unable to put her feelings into words. How could she explain that this moment felt like a turning point? That hearing someone talk about overcoming adversity and staying true to oneself had awakened something inside her she didn't even know existed? All she could do was smile weakly and wipe her face with the sleeve of her jacket. The rest of the rally flew by in a blur. Trump wrapped up his speech with a message of hope and unity, encouraging everyone to believe in themselves and their potential to make a difference. The crowd cheered wildly, chanting slogans and waving flags as he exited the stage. Karoline stayed rooted in her spot, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her body. Her mind raced with thoughts and questions. Why had this speech affected her so deeply? What did it mean for her future? And most importantly, what was she going to do next? On the drive home, Karoline sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the lights of the city faded into the darkness of the countryside. Her friends chatted animatedly about their favorite moments from the rally, but she barely heard them. Her thoughts were consumed by the realization that she couldn't go back to the way things were before. Something inside her had shifted, and she knew she couldn't ignore it. That night, as she lay in bed replaying the events of the day in her mind, Karoline made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let fear or doubt control her anymore. If Trump could face criticism and setbacks head-on, then so could she. She decided to take the first step toward finding her purpose. Not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. Little did she know this decision would set off a chain reaction of events that would transform her life in ways she never imagined. Over the following days, Karoline couldn't stop thinking about the rally. She found herself watching videos of Trump's past speeches online, reading articles about his policies, and listening to podcasts discussing his leadership style. Each piece of information added another layer to her understanding of the man who had inspired her that night. More importantly, it helped her connect the dots between his message and her own aspirations. She began to see parallels between his journey and hers, two people determined to push forward despite obstacles standing in their way. Karoline also started paying closer attention to the political landscape around her. She realized that many of the issues Trump spoke about, things like economic opportunity, personal freedom, and standing up against injustice, aligned with values she already held dear. Growing up in a small town, she'd always believed in the importance of hard work and community. Now she saw how those beliefs fit into a larger framework of conservative principles. This newfound clarity gave her a sense of direction she'd been missing for years, but perhaps the most surprising change was the fire that ignited within her. Before the rally, Karoline had been content to sit on the sidelines, observing the world from a safe distance. Now she felt an urge to get involved, to take action and make a difference. She wanted to be part of the movement she'd witnessed that night, to contribute in some meaningful way. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a mission, and nothing was going to stop her from pursuing it. Looking back, Karoline knew the rally had been more than just a political event. It had been a catalyst, a spark that lit a flame inside her. The tears she shed that night weren't just tears of inspiration. They were tears of transformation. From that moment on, she vowed to embrace the lessons she'd learned and channel them into building a brighter future, for herself and for others. In the days following the rally, Karoline couldn't shake the emotions she felt that night. The speech had stirred something deep within her, a mix of inspiration, determination, and a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she felt like she had clarity about who she was and what she wanted to do with her life. But clarity alone wasn't enough. Karoline knew that if she wanted to make a real change, not just in her own life but in the world around her, she would have to take action. And so, she began a journey of discovery, diving headfirst into the world of politics and conservative values. Her first step was simple: research. Karoline spent hours online, reading articles, watching videos, and listening to podcasts about Donald Trump's policies and the principles behind them. She learned about topics she'd never paid much attention to before: tax reform, immigration, healthcare, and the importance of individual freedoms. At first, some of it seemed overwhelming. The language was complex and the debates often felt heated and polarizing. But Karoline didn't let that discourage her. Instead, she approached it like solving a puzzle, piecing together information until the bigger picture became clear. What surprised her most was how many of these ideas resonated with her personally. Growing up in a small town, she'd always valued hard work, self-reliance, and community. These were the same principles that underpinned much of the conservative movement. As she delved deeper, Karoline realized that this wasn't just about politics, it was about a way of life. It was about standing up for what you believed in, supporting your neighbors, and fighting for opportunities that allowed everyone to succeed. This revelation gave her a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. Feeling more confident in her understanding, Karoline decided it was time to take the next step, getting involved. She started attending local Republican meetings in her area, even though the thought of walking into a room full of strangers intimidated her. At her first meeting, she sat quietly in the back, observing as people discussed upcoming events, policy initiatives, and ways to engage the community. Though she didn't say much, she left feeling inspired. These weren't just politicians or activists. They were ordinary people like her, passionate about making a difference. Over time, Karoline became a regular at these gatherings. She introduced herself to others, asking questions and sharing her thoughts when she felt comfortable. To her surprise, people welcomed her warmly. They appreciated her curiosity and eagerness to learn. One woman, a longtime member of the group, took Karoline under her wing, offering guidance and encouragement. "You've got fire in you," she told Karoline one evening after a particularly lively discussion. "Don't be afraid to use it." Encouraged by this support, Karoline began volunteering for local campaigns. Her first role was modest, stuffing envelopes and making phone calls to remind voters about upcoming elections. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her a taste of what grassroots activism looked like. She enjoyed talking to people, hearing their stories, and explaining why certain candidates or policies mattered. Slowly but surely, she gained confidence in her ability to communicate effectively and connect with others. As her involvement grew, so did her responsibilities. Before long, Karoline found herself organizing events, leading voter registration drives, and even speaking at small gatherings. Her natural charisma and genuine passion made her stand out. People listened when she spoke because they could tell she believed every word. Whether she was discussing the importance of economic freedom or encouraging young people to get involved in politics, her message was always heartfelt and relatable. One of the most transformative moments came when she was asked to give a short speech at a local town hall meeting. Standing in front of an audience for the first time was nerve-wracking, but Karoline reminded herself of the night at the rally, the tears, the inspiration, the promise she'd made to herself. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. She shared her story, from feeling lost and uncertain to finding purpose through her newfound beliefs. She talked about the power of perseverance and the importance of standing up for what you believe in, no matter how daunting the challenge might seem. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. People came up to her afterward, thanking her for her words and telling her how much they resonated. That moment solidified something Karoline had begun to suspect. She had a gift for inspiring others. Her personal journey wasn't just meaningful. To her, it could also motivate those around her to take action and pursue their dreams. Word of Karoline's dedication and talent spread quickly. Local leaders took notice of her energy and commitment, inviting her to join larger projects and campaigns. She worked tirelessly, balancing her volunteer efforts with part-time jobs and personal commitments. There were late nights spent planning events, early mornings knocking on doors, and countless conversations with people from all walks of life. Despite the exhaustion, Karoline thrived. Every new challenge pushed her further out of her comfort zone, helping her grow stronger and more resilient. Her friends and family noticed the change in her too. Gone was the uncertain young woman who struggled to find direction after college. In her place was someone driven, confident, and unafraid to chase her ambitions. They marveled at how much she had transformed in such a short time. "I don't know what happened to you," one of her closest friends joked during a coffee date. "But I love this version of you." Karoline laughed, knowing exactly what had happened. That rally, the words, the energy, the tears, had awakened something
inside her. It had given her permission to dream bigger, work harder, and believe in herself.
Now she was determined to pay that gift forward by helping others discover their own potential. By the end of her first year in politics, Karoline had become a well-known figure in her local community. She was invited to speak at events, write opinion pieces for local newspapers, and mentor young volunteers eager to make a difference. Her speeches often included references to that pivotal night at the rally, not because she wanted to focus on herself, but because she wanted others to understand the impact a single moment could have. Sometimes, she would say, all it takes is one experience to change everything. Looking back, Karoline realized how far she'd come since that day she reluctantly agreed to attend the rally with her friends. Back then, she'd been searching for answers, unsure of where her life was headed. Now, she had a clear vision of her future, and the tools to turn that vision into reality. Politics had become more than just an interest. It was her passion, her mission, and her calling. And while she knew there would still be challenges ahead, she faced them with the same resilience and determination she admired in others. For Karoline Leavitt, the journey was only beginning. Karoline's growing reputation as a passionate and effective communicator didn't go unnoticed for long. Her tireless work ethic, combined with her ability to connect with people on a personal level, caught the attention of influential figures within the conservative movement. Local leaders began inviting her to larger events, asking her to share her story and inspire others. What started as small-town activism quickly expanded into something much bigger, propelling Karoline onto a statewide stage. One of the first major opportunities came when she was asked to speak at a regional conference hosted by a prominent Republican organization. At first, Karoline hesitated. Speaking in front of dozens of strangers was one thing. Addressing hundreds of people, including seasoned politicians and activists, was another. But deep down, she knew this was her chance to make an impact beyond her community. With encouragement from her mentors, she accepted the invitation and prepared meticulously for the event. The day of the conference arrived, and Karoline stood backstage, nervously reviewing her notes. The room buzzed with energy as attendees filed in, chatting excitedly about the speakers and panels scheduled for the day. When her name was announced, she took a deep breath and walked out onto the stage. The spotlight hit her, and for a moment, she felt overwhelmed. But then she remembered why she was there, not for herself, but to share the message that had changed her life. She began by recounting the story of the rally, the night Donald Trump's speech moved her to tears, and how it sparked a transformation within her. As she spoke, she noticed heads nodding in agreement and smiles spreading across faces. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated by her authenticity. She went on to talk about the importance of grassroots activism, emphasizing that real change happens when ordinary people step up and get involved. "You don't need to be perfect," she said, her voice steady and full of conviction. "You just need to care enough to try." When she finished, the audience erupted into applause. Several attendees approached her afterward, thanking her for her words and expressing how inspired they felt. One man, a veteran activist who'd been working in politics for decades, pulled her aside and said, "You have a gift. Don't waste it." Those words stayed with Karoline, reinforcing her belief that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As word of her powerful speeches spread, more doors began to open. Karoline was invited to join panels, moderate discussions, and even appear on local radio shows. Each opportunity allowed her to refine her skills and expand her reach. She became known not just for her passion, but also for her ability to break down complex issues into relatable terms. Whether she was explaining tax policies to young voters or discussing healthcare reform with seniors, she made sure everyone left feeling informed and empowered. Her growing visibility brought new responsibilities too. A well-known conservative group offered her a position as a spokesperson, tasked with representing their mission and advocating for their causes. It was a significant step up from her volunteer work, and while it came with its own set of challenges, Karoline embraced the role wholeheartedly. She traveled across the state, meeting with community leaders, speaking at rallies, and engaging with voters from all walks of life. Every interaction taught her something new, whether it was understanding different perspectives or learning how to navigate difficult conversations. Despite her success, Karoline faced skepticism along the way. Some critics dismissed her as too idealistic, accusing her of being overly enthusiastic without fully grasping the complexities of politics. Others questioned her motives, suggesting that she was using her story for personal gain. These comments stung, especially since she poured so much of herself into her work. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, making her wonder if she truly belonged in such a competitive and often harsh environment. But instead of letting negativity bring her down, Karoline used it as fuel to push harder. She reminded herself of the lessons she'd learned from Trump's speech: perseverance and authenticity. If she stayed true to her values and continued working hard, she believed she could overcome any obstacle. She also leaned heavily on the support system she'd built over the years, her mentors, friends, and family, who encouraged her to keep going even when times got tough. One particularly challenging moment came during a televised debate. Karoline had been invited to participate alongside other young leaders, representing her organization's stance on key policy issues. While she was confident in her knowledge, the format of the debate was fast-paced and intense, leaving little room for error. Midway through, an opponent challenged her points aggressively, attempting to undermine her credibility. For a brief moment, Karoline faltered, unsure of how to respond. But then she remembered the advice her mentor had given her. Stay calm, stay focused, and let your truth shine. Taking a deep breath, Karoline composed herself and delivered a thoughtful response, turning the conversation back to the core principles she believed in. By the end of the debate, she had earned respect from both the moderator and the audience. Though it wasn't easy, the experience taught her valuable lessons about resilience and staying grounded under pressure. As months turned into years, Karoline's influence continued to grow. She became a trusted voice within the conservative movement, known for her dedication, integrity, and ability to bridge divides. Her speeches evolved from personal stories to broader calls for unity and action, urging people to come together, despite their differences. She often reminded audiences that progress required collaboration, not division, a message that resonated deeply in an increasingly polarized world. Through it all, Karoline remained humble, never forgetting where she came from or the journey that brought her here. She frequently returned to her hometown, visiting schools and community centers to encourage young people to get involved in politics. "If I can do it," she would tell them, "so can you. All it takes is one step, one decision to believe in yourself." By the time she reached her mid-20s, Karoline Leavitt had achieved what many thought impossible for someone so young. From attending a rally out of curiosity to becoming a respected leader in her field, she had proven that determination and authenticity could take you far. But she knew her journey was far from over. With each new challenge, she grew stronger, wiser, and more committed to making a difference. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly have its ups and downs, Karoline faced it with unwavering confidence, knowing she had already defied the odds once before. As Karoline Leavitt's influence grew, so did the scrutiny she faced. With visibility came criticism, and not all of it was constructive. Some people admired her passion and authenticity, but others saw her rapid rise as a threat, or worse, as an opportunity to tear her down. The more she spoke out, the more she found herself at the center of heated debates, both online and offline. It was a side of public life she hadn't anticipated, and it tested her resolve in ways she never imagined. One of the first major challenges came when a viral post misquoted her during a speech. Someone had taken a snippet of her words out of context, twisting their meaning to paint her in a negative light. Within hours, social media erupted with backlash. Comment sections filled with harsh remarks, and strangers tagged her in posts accusing her of hypocrisy or insincerity. At first, Karoline panicked. She spent an entire night scrolling through the comments, reading every accusation, trying to understand how this had happened. By morning, she felt emotionally drained and questioned whether she was cut out for this kind of spotlight. Her mentor noticed her distress and pulled her aside. "Karoline," she said firmly, "you can't let them win. If you stop now, they'll have exactly what they want, your silence." Those words hit home. Karoline realized that reacting impulsively or letting fear dictate her actions would only make things worse. Instead, she decided to address the situation head-on. She wrote a calm, thoughtful response clarifying her original statement and posted it on her social media accounts. While not everyone accepted her explanation, many appreciated her transparency and willingness to engage honestly. That experience taught her an important lesson. Staying composed under pressure was just as crucial as delivering a powerful message. But the challenges didn't stop there. As Karoline continued to rise in prominence, some within her own political circles began to question her motives. A few skeptics accused her of leveraging her story, the rally, the tears, the transformation, for personal gain. They whispered behind closed doors, suggesting she cared more about fame than principles. These accusations hurt deeply because they struck at the heart of who she was. Karoline knew her journey wasn't about ambition, it was about purpose. Yet proving that to others proved far more difficult than she expected. To combat these doubts, Karoline doubled down on her commitment to service. She poured even more energy into grassroots initiatives, organizing events, mentoring young activists, and amplifying voices that often went unheard. She made sure her actions spoke louder than any rumors ever could. When critics dismissed her as too idealistic, she leaned into that label, embracing it as a badge of honor. If being idealistic means believing we can build a better future, she told a group of volunteers, then I'm proud to wear that title. Another hurdle came in the form of burnout. Balancing her growing responsibilities with her personal life became increasingly difficult. Days stretched into nights, and weekends blurred into weekdays. There were times when Karoline felt like she was running on empty, juggling multiple projects while trying to maintain her mental and emotional health. Friends noticed the toll it was taking on her. One evening over dinner, a close friend gently confronted her. "You're doing amazing work," he said, "but you won't be able to help anyone if you don't take care of yourself first." It was a wake-up call. Karoline realized she couldn't pour from an empty cup. She started setting boundaries, carving out time for rest and reflection. She reconnected with hobbies she'd neglected, reading, hiking, and writing in her journal. These small acts of self-care helped recharge her spirit and reminded her why she'd embarked on this journey in the first place. Far from slowing her down, they gave her the strength to keep pushing forward. Public speaking also presented its own set of challenges. While Karoline had grown comfortable addressing crowds, not every audience was receptive. During one particularly tense town hall meeting, a vocal opponent interrupted her repeatedly, questioning her credibility and mocking her youth. The room grew uneasy as tension mounted. For a moment, Karoline considered walking away, but then she remembered the lessons she'd learned from past experiences. Stay calm, stay focused, and let your truth shine. Taking a deep breath, she turned to face her critic directly. "I hear your concerns," she said evenly, "and I respect your right to disagree. But instead of attacking each other, let's focus on finding solutions that benefit everyone." Her composure disarmed the heckler, and the rest of the attendees applauded her grace under fire. Moments like these reinforced her belief that leadership wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about navigating it with integrity and empathy. Despite the obstacles, Karoline refused to let negativity define her path. She drew inspiration from the very movement that had sparked her journey. She thought back to Trump's speeches, the way he spoke about resilience and perseverance, and reminded herself that adversity was part of the process. Every challenge was an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more determined. And while the road wasn't easy, she knew she wasn't alone. Her mentors, friends, and supporters stood by her side, cheering her on through every triumph and setback. Over time, Karoline developed thicker skin. Criticism still stung occasionally, but she learned to separate constructive feedback from baseless attacks. She surrounded herself with people who uplifted her and distanced herself from those who sought to bring her down. Most importantly, she stayed true to her values, refusing to compromise her integrity for the sake of popularity or convenience. One of the most rewarding aspects of overcoming these challenges was the impact it had on others. Young people, especially women, began reaching out to her, sharing their own struggles and asking for advice. Many saw themselves in her story, a young woman navigating uncertainty and striving to make a difference despite the odds. Karoline took pride in being a source of encouragement, reminding them that setbacks were temporary and growth often came from discomfort. By the time she reached her late 20s, Karoline had weathered storms that might have derailed someone else entirely. Each challenge had shaped her into a stronger, more resilient leader. She no longer feared criticism or failure because she understood that both were inevitable parts of progress. What mattered most was how she responded, whether she chose to give up or push through. Looking back, Karoline realized that the difficulties she faced weren't roadblocks. They were stepping stones. They forced her to dig deeper, to discover reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. And while she knew the journey ahead would continue to test her, she faced it with unwavering determination. After all, she had already proven to herself and to the world that she could rise above anything that came her way. Years passed, and Karoline Leavitt's name became synonymous with leadership, resilience, and a commitment to making a difference. What began as a single moment of inspiration at a rally had blossomed into a life dedicated to empowering others and championing the values she believed in. Her journey was far from easy, but every challenge only strengthened her resolve and deepened her impact. By the time she reached her early 30s, Karoline had established herself as one of the most influential voices in modern conservatism, a beacon of hope for those seeking purpose and direction. Karoline's influence extended far beyond speeches and rallies. She used her platform to mentor young leaders, particularly women, who often felt overlooked or underestimated in the political arena. She launched initiatives aimed at fostering grassroots activism, teaching participants how to organize campaigns, engage communities, and advocate effectively for change. Through workshops, webinars, and one-on-one coaching, she inspired countless individuals to step into their power and make their voices heard. Many of her mentees went on to hold positions of influence themselves, carrying forward the lessons they'd learned from her. Her work wasn't limited to politics either. Recognizing that true progress required addressing broader societal issues, Karoline expanded her focus to include education reform, economic empowerment, and mental health awareness. She partnered with organizations working to improve access to resources for underserved communities, ensuring that no one was left behind. Her ability to bridge divides and bring people together earned her respect across party lines, proving that meaningful change was possible when collaboration replaced division. One of Karoline's proudest achievements came when she spearheaded a statewide campaign focused on voter engagement. The initiative aimed to educate citizens about their rights, simplify the registration process, and encourage participation in local elections. It was a massive undertaking, requiring months of planning, coordination, and outreach. But the results were remarkable. Voter turnout increased significantly, especially among younger demographics who had previously felt disconnected from the political process. For Karoline, this was proof that small actions, when multiplied by many, could lead to transformative outcomes. As her reputation grew, so did opportunities to share her story on larger stages. Karoline traveled extensively, speaking at national conferences, universities, and community events. Her speeches remained deeply personal, weaving together her own experiences with calls to action that resonated with diverse audiences. Whether addressing a room of seasoned policymakers or a group of high school students, she spoke with the same passion and authenticity that had captivated listeners years earlier. "Your voice matters," she would say. "Don't wait for permission to use it." Despite her success, Karoline never lost sight of where she came from. She returned regularly to her hometown, visiting schools and community centers to remind young people that they too could achieve great things. During these visits, she shared stories of her struggles, the uncertainty after college, the doubts she faced along the way, and the moments when she almost gave up. She wanted them to know that success wasn't about being perfect. It was about persevering through imperfection. "If I can do it," she often said, "so can you." Her story also inspired books, documentaries, and even a feature film exploring her journey from a small-town girl unsure of her future to a national figure shaping the course of history. While some might have shied away from such attention, Karoline embraced it as an opportunity to amplify her message further. Every interview, article, and appearance was another chance to reach someone new, to plant seeds of inspiration that might grow into something extraordinary. Of course, there were still challenges along the way. Politics remained unpredictable, and criticism never fully disappeared. But Karoline handled it all with grace, using every experience as a learning opportunity. She understood that leadership wasn't about avoiding controversy. It was about navigating it with integrity and purpose. And while she couldn't control what others said or thought, she could control how she responded. Time and again, she chose kindness over anger, patience over frustration, and action over apathy. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Karoline's legacy was the ripple effect of her work. The people she inspired didn't just listen, they acted. Former volunteers became community organizers. Students she encouraged pursued careers in public service. Families she helped connect with resources paid it forward by assisting others in need. In this way, her impact multiplied exponentially, touching lives she may never meet but whose stories would carry echoes of hers. Reflecting on her journey, Karoline often thought back to that night at the rally, the tears streaming down her face, the realization that she wasn't alone, and the promise she made to herself to never stop fighting for what she believed in. That single event had set her on a path she could never have imagined, leading her to discover not only her purpose, but also her potential. Along the way, she had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of countless others. In interviews and speeches, Karoline frequently emphasized that her story wasn't unique. There are millions of people out there searching for meaning, just like I was, she would say. What I've learned is that sometimes, all it takes is one moment. One spark to ignite a fire within you. Hold on to that spark. Nurture it. Let it guide you. By the time she reached midlife, Karoline had accomplished more than she ever dreamed possible. Yet, she viewed her achievements not as endpoints, but as stepping stones toward even greater goals. She continued to dream big, advocating for policies and initiatives that would create lasting change. Her vision was expansive, rooted in the belief that everyone deserved the opportunity to thrive, and that collective effort could move mountains. Looking ahead, Karoline knew the road would remain unpredictable. There would be victories and setbacks, triumphs and trials. But she faced the future with confidence, knowing she had already weathered storms that once seemed insurmountable. More importantly, she carried with her the knowledge that her journey wasn't just about personal success. It was about lifting others as she climbed. Karoline Leavitt's legacy was one of transformation, not just of herself, but of the world around her. From a curious young woman attending a rally to a trailblazing leader inspiring generations, her story proved that one person truly could make a difference. And though her path was marked by challenges, it was also illuminated by hope, perseverance, and an unshakable belief in the power of possibility. For Karoline, the greatest reward wasn't fame or recognition. It was knowing that her life had touched others in ways that would endure long after she was gone.